afternoon, everybody. Welcome this afternoon. So glad to see so many Fran fans here on this auspicious occasion of bringing people together to celebrate a wonderful scholar, collaborator, curator, colleague. Please come in, there's tons of room. My name is Sara-Jayne Parsons. I'm the director and curator of the art galleries here at TCU, and I'm really delighted to be working with our colleague, Dr. Jamin An, who's going to be the moderator for our session this afternoon. I know he's got lots of questions for the panelists and some thoughts to think about, but really just to welcome you and to let you know that we will have some time to discuss with the panel. I know Jamin's asking questions, but we also have a period of time for Q&A at the end, so if something's really burning in your mind, please hang on to that. And be sure to grill the panelists at the end. And then when we wrap up, you're all welcome to come over and enjoy the opening of the exhibition over at Fort Worth Contemporary Arts. It officially opens at 6, but get there as soon as you can. There's a bar, there's food, so we want to make sure that you're well taken care of and comfortable while you're enjoying that exhibition. It's going to give me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Jamin An, the D.D. Rose Potter Chair of Contemporary Art. And he's an assistant professor here at TCU, teaching all manner of things under the heading of contemporary art and art history. And he's going to set the scene for us before we're introduced to the panel members. So thank you all for being here, and please welcome Jamin.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the kind invitation to help celebrate Dr. Francis Colpitt's work and legacy. Again, my name is Jamin. I teach here at in the School of Art. I teach contemporary art history, and I'm privileged to hold the chair that Dr. Francis Colpitt inaugurated, the D.D. Potter Rose Chair in Contemporary Art. And I thought I'd take the liberty of setting the scene just a little bit, especially for those of us in the audience who didn't get to know Fran directly, but know her work, her formidable legacy. She probably needs no introduction, so I thought perhaps I'd share some of the words that I've kind of noted from some of the pieces that the curatorial team have highlighted as a representation of what was really unique about Fran's critical insight. The little bits that I wanted to share also speak to, I think, two big ideas I've gleaned from all the folks here at TCU, especially about their time with Fran. Those two ideas are intimacy and generosity. And I think for intimacy, it seems to me that she really was a part of so many folks' engagement in the field of art, but also the way she wanted to think about artworks, it seems to me, was really about this intimate, perhaps astonishing encounter. She once wrote, "I'm interested in art made by artists anywhere in any medium. My interest is aroused by works that resonate with meaningfulness and beauty." She goes on to explain beauty isn't, quote, "an intensity, clarity, or succinctness of thought and process, a sensibility emanating from the work, capable of crystallizing thought and emotion into a precise and unforgettable moment." In an essay on kind of the revival of painting in the late 90s, early 2000s, of course, whether painting was really dead was a kind of concern of Fran's. She wrote, "To be seduced mentally, visually, or bodily by a painting is no longer a stupid crime, but a pleasure." So perhaps that was also at stake in this beautiful encounter she speaks of. The second point that I feel like I've heard so much of in the memories that folks have been kind to share with me is her generosity, her kind of interest in kind of expanding, spreading out not only her knowledge, but kind of the special encounter she's describing. And this generosity seems to be at stake in the way she thought of her own critical writing. She wrote once, quote, "Criticism is a descriptive, not a prescriptive act. Description comprises the bulk of my critical writing because I want the work I'm writing about to be as vividly imaginable and intensely convincing as possible." So I hope these are some of the ideas our esteemed panelists will be exploring together I'd like to invite them all up and to join me here, and I'll take a moment to introduce each of them, and then we'll kind of get started with some questions. Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Should get funny.
Oh, we need an extra chair.
Oh, there's a stool.
Yeah, let me
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no.
Yes.
All right, so we're privileged to have 5 artists featured in Do You Really Believe That, along with 2 members of the curatorial team, and I'll just take a moment to introduce each of them before we dive into our conversation. Let me just make sure. Allow me to first introduce Edith Baumann. Edith lives and works in Santa Monica, California. Her paintings concisely balance precision with vulnerability, motion, and natural imperfection. She received her BFA from UCLA in 1975 and completed an MFA in painting at USC in 1985. Baumann has been the subject of numerous solo exhibitions, nationally as well as internationally, at Beatrix Wilhelm Gallery in Stuttgart. Parrish Heinen has presented 2 solo exhibitions of Baumann's work in 2018 and then 2020. She was recently included in group exhibitions 8 Ball at Martis Gallery in New York and Emergence, Art and the Incarnation of Space at Baylor. Her work was included also in the group exhibition Cloud Cover at McLean Gallery in 2021. Welcome, Edith.
Thank you.
Next, we have John Eden, who was born in Los Angeles, where he also currently resides. Eden received his MFA from USC in 1981 and was the recipient of the California State Fellowship Grant in 1978 to 1980. Eden received his MA from Cal State Northridge in 1978 and his BFA from the San Francisco Art Institute in 1972. He curated and participated in the exhibition Fear in the Sky at West LA College Art Gallery in Culver City in 2019. He has also participated in numerous other group exhibitions throughout the US and abroad, such as Colorimetry, shown at the Museum of Art and History in Lancaster in 2014. His solo exhibitions include Roundels, exhibited at the College of the Canyons Art Gallery in Santa Clarita in 2016. Eden's work can be found in the J. Paul Getty Museum collection. Constance Connie Lowe was born in St. Louis, Missouri in 1951 and received a BFA from SMU and an MFA from Western Michigan University. She was selected for the Art Pace International Art in Residence program in 1998. Her solo exhibitions include Air to Ground, Chroma Ray at SMU, Equivocal Topographies at the Southwest School of Art, Netherland at Trinity College, Hartford, Striking Likeness with Art Pace, and Double Vision at the Phoenix Museum of Art, which was itself curated and with contributions by Frances Colpitt herself. Lowe's work was also seen in Psychedelic and Texas Women, A New History of Abstract Art with the San Antonio Museum of Art. Her work is included in the collections of the Linda Pace Foundation, University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center, University Health Women's and Children's Hospital, and the Holdsworth Center for Educational Leadership. She was professor of art at the University of Texas at San Antonio from 1991 to 2016, and now lives and works in her hometown of St. Louis. She is represented by and regularly exhibits with Ruiz Healy Art in San Antonio. Welcome. Aaron Parazette received his BFA from the University of South Florida in Tampa in 1987, his MFA from the Claremont Graduate University in 1990. Parazette completed 2 core fellowship residencies at the MFA Houston from 1990 to 1992. In 2025, he will be an artist in residence at the Elaine de Kooning House in East Hampton. His solo exhibitions include North Swell at Dallas Contemporary, Snow White Tan at Tally Dunn, Wind Swell at the Gregory Lynn Gallery in San Francisco, Drive Through at the Suburban Gallery in Chicago, and Aaron Parazette, Perspectives 141 at Camp Houston. He is represented by the McLean Gallery in Houston, where he has had 3 solo exhibitions and been included in numerous group exhibitions. He is a professor at the University of Houston School of Art, where he has taught since 1997. Hector Ramirez is an artist from El Paso, Texas, and is currently based in Fort Worth. In 2020, he earned an MFA in sculpture from here at TCU, and currently teaches at the University of Texas, Arlington. Ramirez has exhibited in multiple solo and group shows around the DFW, as well as in New York City, Berlin, and Hiroshima. Some of these include a University of Texas Arlington faculty show and a show at Blind Alley in Fort Worth. Other outings have included as well a show at Aurora in New York City. His work is included in the Modern Art Museum's Fort Worth Modern Billings. Most recently, Ramirez's work was published in Artillery magazine as well. We also have 2 members of the curatorial team with us, and I'll introduce them as well. Dr. Scott Sherer is professor of art history and the director of art galleries in the School of Art at UT San Antonio. He earned his BA in architecture from Yale, an MA in art history from the University of Kentucky, and a PhD in comparative studies in discourse and society from the University of Minnesota. Sherer teaches a range of courses and seminars in modern contemporary art. His research continues philosophical and artistic traditions that examine the inherent distance and opportunities between lived sensory experience and artistic representations. He is overseeing the exhibition's stop at San Antonio. And then last but not least, Dr. Sara-Jayne Parsons is the director and curator of our art galleries here at TCU. Parsons received her PhD from the University of Plymouth and has led the art galleries here since 2014. Her curatorial practice is informed by working in close collaboration with artists to produce new artworks through commissions, exhibitions, and artist residencies. Recent projects include Pleasure and Protest, Yours in Extraction with Robin Woolston, and Caribbean Fantasia with Raphael Barantini. So thank you so much for being here, and welcome everyone. I thought I'd start with just trying to get a better sense from all of you about how you knew Fran. And I wondered if, for those of you who are willing, if you could share how you knew Fran and a memory that you think captures her legacy or perhaps tells us something important about her. And maybe, John, you might like to start us off.
Well, I met Fran. I'm John Eden. I have the red bell in the show. Later you'll see it there. It's a resin bell. And I met Fran at USC. She was entering her PhD program, and I was studying for my MFA there. I was a painter, but I've become a sculptor. I saw the light. I really believe in sculpture. Fran kind of went the other way. She started out as a painter and then became interested in sculpture, and so that's kind of what happens to people, I suppose. I have a few words I'd like to say about her, and if you would let me read this, I would like to. Dr. Frances Colpitt and I came to USC in the waning summer days of 1978. Frances stood out because she had an uncanny command of art history, all articulated with a smoothly confident Southern accent. If you were an Okie, you would not say poto. You would say poto. And that's kind of where we came together because I have family roots in Oklahoma myself. So I felt an instant kinship with Fran in the very beginning. Okay, let me set it up. In those early years, she sported a lion's mane of henna red hair, a beautiful henna red. And she carried a black leather briefcase with a matching black leather jacket, and all willfully comported with the slightest hitch in her gait. she looked more hip music producer than art historian. That image was reinforced by her vintage 12-cylinder British Racing Green Jaguar sedan with plush leather seats and an age of the synthetics. The two of us had a special sibling-like affinity for one another, not only because of our interest in art, but like I said, because of our Oklahoma roots. Fran wrote about my show, my painting show at UFC for the Leica Journal in 1980. I think it probably would be the first piece of writing that she ever published. So she is dear to me in that way, but there's more things to say about it too. She told me about the process she used to decide on her PhD program, and it was because of Dr. Susie Larson, who was a published art critic and author. And her specialty was in American abstract painting of the 30s. And that made total sense to me because I went to USC because I wanted to study with Peter Plagans, who was the author of Sunshine Muse, which was the first art history record of California, basically. So we kind of gelled on that too. But I want to say that I think that the key to her well-known motivational question was planted when she came to USC, because we both had a teacher there, and Dr. Hospers, who was a published writer as well as a philosophy professor. And and libertarianism, which is what we kind of took away from him, was the fact that you are open in any situation to let yourself take it in and judge it on your own and not have any preconceived biases about it. I know that's impossible, but it was a worthy thing to try to approach. And so that's why I think that she had that question, that well-known question, why do you really believe that? And I'd like to say, yes, I think we do. As an Air Force photographer, I worked part-time at USC, and so when I was assigned to photograph the avant-garde and Russian art at the LA County Museum of Art for the architecture department, I happily agreed, and Frances also jumped at the chance to become my photo assistant for the day. The idea of having unbridled access to a famous reconstruction of the fabled 010 room full of Malevich original abstracts works were exhilarating for us both. We ended that session photographing each other sitting in the chair, that famous chair in the corner. Now, I think we have a picture of that in the ephemera part of the exhibition. So she was my MFA thesis editor who taught me how to write about my art, but obviously couldn't help me with my delivery. Later that year, Frances and I spent several weeks together in New York City, staying as colleagues in the mythical Chelsea Hotel in room 717. On our first morning there, we woke up to a dead rat laying expired on our floor. Frances worriedly asked, what should we do with it? And I said, that's easy, we just throw it out the window like any other New Yorker would. So we went there for different reasons. She was there to interview important figures in minimalism for her dissertation. But we also went there to ascertain whether or not we wanted to relocate permanently to the city of record. Our partners, Jeannie and Donnie, suggested that we check it out for a couple of months, and if we really wanted to do it, they might consider joining us there. Okay. So I spent about 2 weeks like roaming around New York City, just kind of aimlessly. But the whole time I was there, I was like missing my studio, my skylit studio in LA with that beautiful light that they had that I couldn't emulate if I went to New York. It would be a small window probably if I was lucky. And so I came back sooner than Fran did, but Fran finished her interviews with famous people. And every night we'd meet back in the room and she would tell me all the wonderful things that she heard that day. And that to me was an education that I value. I value my time with Fran, and for that reason. The Francis Colpitt we all knew was fearlessly independent, who would entertain almost any proposition as long as it was held up to her formidable. Let me get to the page. I hate this. Could you help me?
Yeah. I might not be able to do much better, but we'll see. Hold on. It's thick paper. How many does it take to turn a page?
I guess 3.
I know, right?
To hold up to her scrutiny. During the early years at USC, she shared with me some of her summer reads, off-topic books like Tom Wolfe's The Right Stuff. But more importantly for us here today is Joan Didion, The White Album. In it, fellow outsider Didion writes a concise description of painter George O'Keeffe's character, and I quote, "The men believed it impossible to paint New York, so George O'Keeffe painted New York. They didn't think much of her bright color, so she made it brighter. The men yearned towards Europe, so she went to Texas." And I think that description would apply to Francis if you just changed a detail or two. Both of them were rare individuals in their prospective art fields, and both were driven to leave a sizable legacy in their wake. I always felt privileged to be part of Fran's early history, and because she was a self-propelled, cyclonic force of nature, a storyteller who had a profound effect on my life. That's it.
Thank you, John. So, I mean, everybody begins somewhere, right? And so it seems to me that one of the insights I've heard about that folks have shared about Fran is how much she centered and foreground her experience with artists and the words of artists themselves, right? Certainly the early years that you shared with her demonstrates that. Perhaps I could ask Hector to share a memory of Fran that you think captures her legacy, or perhaps something important to you to maybe bookend the early Fran that we've just heard about.
Well, I got Fran towards the end, so I feel like we didn't talk much about art. We kind of just talked about life, just things going on. But I guess something that captured, or that I feel that fits that question, is she really enjoyed or appreciated when students went on and to teach or further their education. That's what I got. But I mean, my stories are probably a little too crazy. I'll play. But I mean, she was bold and she was strong. I mean, for me, I still feel like she, like everything here was still functioning, and she just felt slow. But I really thought she was coming back. She seemed like she was doing better. But I don't know. I think I had good times with her. I mean, we laughed. I feel like she'd be kind of a little weird about this if she was here. That's kind of what I've been thinking about. Is just kind of like, what would she say? What would she be telling me? Or because I drove her a lot to the like doctor's appointments, dentists, things like that, and we would just talk about pretty much anything and everything. I don't know, I'm just going off the rails, but
Thank you.
Well, I'll follow on that and just say, I want to echo what Hector's saying, that Fran was hugely supportive and hugely interested in artists. And and in a very, as has already been said, in a really generous way. And I met her when I just been in Texas for a couple of years, and just sort of happenstance because she was decided to curate a show with Sharon Engelstein, my partner, at the satellite space in San Antonio. And that's the first time I think I went to San Antonio and met Connie there.
I was in that show.
Oh, Edith was in the show, okay. Yes, it was a two-person show.
Okay, well then it wasn't that show. At Blue Show, yeah.
But as soon as we met, we just got on really famously. I think partially because while Fran was from Tulsa, she had spent such a significant amount of her developmental years and time in California, and as was mentioned, finishing her work at USC, teaching there, and then in Santa Barbara as well. And so coming from California, I think she'd only been here a few years as well. And so we really, as everyone who knew Fran, enjoyed her company. I did too. And she was really a huge champion of my work. And then there was just really an enjoyable personal relationship too. And it caused me to not to go to San Antonio more, but when I would go there, I would always make a point of seeing Fran, and when she came to Houston, it was really wonderful. So, yeah.
She really admired you guys.
Yeah.
So I met Fran when I came to interview for my position at University of Texas at San Antonio in 1991, and she had been there only a year herself, and I was to become the first woman tenure in a tenure track position in the studio area, and she was one of two female faculty members in art history. And so I asked to speak with her privately, in addition to the dinners and all that stuff that we had, and where we had plenty of margaritas, so we needed to have an official discussion in her office. And so I'd asked to speak with her, and it was arranged. And when the very first words she said to me when I entered her office was, "I can't believe they let you talk to me," because unlike her coming to TCU to the D.D. Potter Rose, is that right? Endowed chair. She was under much more suspicion by some of the longtime faculty members at UT which you probably heard about, at UT San Antonio. And they certainly came around, but they really always tried to pigeonhole her as only being interested in abstraction or minimalism, or not being interested enough in talking about San Antonio artists or whatever, none of which were really true. And I think that certainly was revealed over time. But I have a lot of memories, and they are all over the map. But I think the most formative one, or generative one for me, is thinking about the In Plain Sight exhibition, which was an exhibition she curated in '94 of abstract paint, or all painters, but abstract
Yeah, I think so.
artist from Los Angeles that was held at Blue Star Art Space in San Antonio. And the reason that was so important was that I didn't know her very well, and she was introducing me not so much to new art, but new ways of thinking about art that I already had some familiarity with. And I think that was one of her real strengths, was the way that she could provoke questions, offer alternative ways of looking at something, even for herself. That never stopped. She wasn't instructive in that regard. But I really feel like that moment was kind of the start of my understanding of her. And over years, I got all sorts of access to things that I couldn't have otherwise through Fran, like a private tour of Donald Judd's space in New York with his plywood fabricator, and just inside stuff, just because she was so much closer to the works of art in her position. And that was a real rare thing, but also just her company was amazing. And there is more than one of us who believe that Fran would really hate being the center of attention like that.
Edith, would you like to share how you met Fran and significant memory?
Yeah, okay, so I met Fran in the late 70s, and I thought I came to art late, because I didn't start painting till I was like 25 or 26, and I talked my way. I was a science major, and I talked my way into an art class at UCLA. So I had a quarter. UCLA was on a 10-week quarter system. So I had a quarter of art training, and I met her just kind of in the art scene, and she knew a lot of the artists that I knew, and I sort of immediately, I ended up with life-threatening illness and so forth, and so at the same time I was getting into meditation and healing energies and thinking about abstraction and that kind of thing. So it all sort of came together for me. And Fran, LA just lost a gift, that they did not support Fran. She was off to Santa Barbara to teach a class on Monday and Wednesday, and Pomona College, 3 hours the other direction, on Tuesday, Thursday, and, not getting paid well and no benefits. And, here she was a doctorate from USC. But we became really close when I was sort of getting nowhere with my work because the men, my work wasn't abstract. It had too much space. Too much movement. That just did not fall into the Ad Reinhardt dictums that they supposedly were following. I always said, and your work is. Okay. So anyway, but I couldn't be in any of their shows, and because I just wasn't abstract. But Fran did a lot of curating of abstract painting shows in the LA area, and she always put me in. But when I went back to USC, because I was teaching at the different colleges and stuff around, but I was also adjunct, being paid very little or whatever, and then I got the opportunity in 82, I guess, for the 3-year MFA program at USC. And, I was sort of in 10 years getting nowhere fast. And I thought, and I was on full scholarship, and I was like, they're going to pay me to go back to school and get my MFA, and then I can teach and get paid more. Yeah, sounds good. And anyway, so when but they hated my work. And so I was on probation for...
That was a good thing.
I was on probation for 2 years, and then I had to form my thesis committee. I mean, sort of like shortly into the program, you know, and I mean, I would, you know, why did you give me a full scholarship to go here? You hate my work. You saw my slides, and, you know. But because I was older, I knew some of the teachers and their work and so forth outside of the school system. And it was like, well, you know, we thought you know, you were misguided and you listened to these other guys, and we thought we could help you out, you know, because we think you're a good artist, but you have wrong ideas about it. Anyway, so so kind of right away I was just going to quit. I mean, it was just, I mean, I would actually get yelled at my painting reviews. You know, it's just, and you know, because I'd been doing what I was interested in for 10 years, and when Fran was teaching at Santa Barbara, Pomona, or whatever, she would have me come in, you know, and do a slideshow and talk to her classes and stuff about my work. And so, you know, she was behind what I was doing. So then I had to do my thesis committee, and I could have people from outside of the USC system. And so Fran immediately said, oh yeah, I'll be on your thesis committee, you know, great. And she had, you know, doctorate from USC, that's terrific. And then I thought, okay, well, so I go over and I see Susan Larson, who's head of the doctoral program, or the whole art history department at USC at the time. And as I'm approaching her, I didn't really know her, met her a couple times. And, you know, as I'm approaching her, and I've got my slides in my hand, and she's giving me her spiel of, you know, I'm just, you know, I don't really, I used to be on the thesis committees of the fine art students, but, you know, I have to be on the thesis committees of the art history, you know, students, and so I'm just not really doing that anymore. And, you know, so I just have, like, too much to do. I mean, she also would write for the LA Times and art critiques and so forth. And, you know, so as she's saying this, she takes my slides and holds them up to the light and says, oh, but I'll be on your thesis committee. So I was like, all right, home free. You know? And basically the last year, just everybody just left me alone. I mean, with the rest of the faculty, it was just like I just did my work and taught my one class, you know, a semester, and you know, graduated. But so, I mean, Fran and I became friends because she loved my work, you know. It was, she, you know, so, I mean, and so then I, you know, we're both women, and both women in the art world, and she was dealing with all the men who wouldn't put me in any of their shows, but I'd be the only woman in all of her shows with the other abstract guys. You know, they had nothing to say about it. You know, I don't know, she just helped me so much to sort of get on the map. And, I started to say, so like at the beginning I was going to quit, and my husband said, well, I wouldn't blame you for quitting, and, you know, but, you know, maybe you can sort of switch your thinking with, you know, just do your own work. Just continue, you know, what you believe in, and doing your own work, and they hate it, and oh well. And if they're going to throw you out, they'll throw you out, you know, and then art historically, you'll be in a, you know, like there's lots of great artists that got thrown out of art school. So, you know, if you can just, you know, stick it out or whatever. And that really sort of switched my thinking, where, you know, you know, I'm not going to fight about it. I'm just, you know, just do what I do, and you can yell at me, oh well, and you don't like it, you don't like it. And it was almost like within me, I mean, I didn't say it, but it was kind of a challenge to just like, you know, you're going to throw me out. You know, just, you know, that's what you'll have to do because I'm just staying here doing my work that you hate. You know, so.
Well, let me jump in. It sounds to me, Edith, and just weaving together what you're sharing about Fran as well with John, Connie, and there's this kind of constant thread that Fran's support, Fran's kind of eye, her kind of seriousness about what artists were making, the seriousness about the roles that she performed in academic context, the art world context.
She stood her ground.
Yeah, and all of them were really about bestowing a kind of light of recognition on what others were doing. And it makes me curious to hear from the group, what was it like to look at a work of art with Fran? I'm kind of curious what that was like and maybe what you learned about beholding a work by watching Fran do it.
I can
Connie,
talk
please.
to that. So one of the things that I really learned was the close attention that she gave to the work. And you had started initially talking about her generosity and intimacy, both of which I think are absolutely true. But and as you just mentioned, she also was very rigorous in not in what she asked of a work in terms of judging it, but in terms of asking the work to kind of meet up to its own potential, if you will. And one of the things I really learned from her, because I never had paid attention to this before, and I think, Erin, your work might have been one of the first ones that she talked about like this, but the aspect of touch, which is both intimate but also rigorous in her thinking, don't you think?
Yeah.
That she really looked at the way paint was applied. She looked at whether the edge was masked or not masked, or if it was painted and unmasked and then masking tape was put next to it later. I mean, those things really mattered to her.
Yeah.
And
the hand
and the eye, I think, together, so that she was both able to think of the work, and not simultaneously, but think of the work not only in the broader picture of both history and contemporary practice, but she was also able to think about the work both in terms of the ideas that it connected to in the bigger picture and that immediacy of it's here right now. And I'm talking about painting, but I think she would I know that she applied that to every other kind of art that she encountered. And we traveled together to many shows, and that was really educational for me. But she really called attention. Erin has these little, as you'll see in the exhibition, these little edges of color that she loved. She really loved those. But she would just keep calling attention to those kinds of things in the work, the way a jud was constructed, for example, or just constantly in that kind of the thing in front of you at the moment, and
how those details connect. You know, the viewer to the work.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And I ended up, through her influence, really adopting a teaching method later on in my teaching career, where I asked the students to describe and not interpret. And it was really hard for them. And it's hard for me that anytime they started drifting towards what it made them feel like, or what they thought it meant, they were pulling away from the description. And I think that descriptive practice, as she articulated herself, was really influential to me as well.
That's a good point.
Thank you, Connie. We have also folks from, I think, all the parts of her life, but also the major centers that have been associated with Fran's scholarship, Southern California, Texas, but also her background and roots in Oklahoma.
But she curated shows with, the New York artists and so forth also.
And that as well. And I'm sort of curious, she once commented on regionalism, or the relationship between creative places outside so-called centers. And she wrote, quote, "The success of a work of art is not determined by comparison." I think her kind of provocation was, well, surely we shouldn't be comparing creative place outside the center with the center in order to substantiate a work. The work of art should be able to substantiate itself. That being said, right, she was such a champion of the immediate circumstances she found herself in, whether in Southern California, New York, Texas. I'm kind of curious, especially for our Texas folks, how do you see Fran's contribution to the art and artists of Texas? What was her role in in making places like San Antonio, here in Fort Worth, Dallas, but also Houston, right? What did she bring to the state she ended up calling her professional home?
Maybe Sarah, do you want to add something?
Well, I was actually just going to mention that in the publication that we're working on as part of the exhibition, there's an essay, a conversation between Angelique Gupta and the writer, and then the curator, Annette Carlozzi, who's a peer of Fran's, and they actually have this conversation about regionalism and kind of what that means. So that's certainly something that we were aware of and thinking about when we were making the show as kind of a curatorial question. But I'm not going to reveal. It's a fascinating kind of read. But yeah, I think for me, in thinking about it, it's more about the relationships, and it doesn't matter kind of where those relationships are happening with those artists. Like Fran was able to, identify a particular location or a trend or something like that, but it never, I don't think she was like a follower. It wasn't a trend per se or something that she would follow in that way.
Yeah, I would add that I think that she, her time in Texas spans a very active evolution of what art has become in Texas, where it was when she arrived here and where it is now. And I think that she saw that as a particular world, that it was a world unto itself, but also within a larger art world. It always, thinking about how the work of Texas artists bounced off of the work that she was seeing in other places. And so specific, and yet, I don't know if it wouldn't be a Venn diagram. Maybe Texas is a circle within a larger circle.
But if you just think about kind of the evolution of Marfa, the idea of Marfa, and in the early 90s and the setting up of Shinati and how Fran was part of that, and now how we talk about Marfa and how different that is. But, Fran was present throughout that kind of evolution and change, but it started with Judd. So there's a very Texas sort of focus that she was part of that community and that growth and that conversation with that particular site.
The thing that I would add to that is that there were so many ways that she became influential, but I think she really underestimated or downplayed her own ability to influence. She doesn't believe that she could ever really give artists advice or help their careers or anything like that. And she was writing for Art in America during her time in San Antonio. And she wrote letters from San Antonio. I can't remember what the little columns are called, but where the writers are writing in from other places and giving a report. And that really changed things for San Antonio. Art Pace was just coming online, coming about, and we got a whole influx of grad students from a lot of other places, and it was very influential because she was she was dissolving that boundary, that regionalist boundary. Yeah. And I think she also paid a lot of attention to people who came through CORE, right? Through the CORE program.
I think so. Sure,
who are always coming from other
places. I'll mention just very quickly I think it's going to be like 1994. She wrote a version of the Letters from San Antonio, an article called Against the Grain, that was about abstraction in Texas. And it's like, abstraction is going against the grain. And at that moment, perhaps it was, but it would be, to just talk about the evolution of what has happened in Texas, it would be crazy to write an article, a piece like that now. The art making is so plural and everything, and so many different ways of making work have been received and are being practiced.
Well, everything we're talking about is before social media as well.
Yeah, right.
So that's a real problem.
for sure. Yeah, and it shouldn't be understated the importance that I think you're referring to, Connie, of what came out in the national magazines. This is pre-social media, of course, and so the only communication that there was about what was happening in particular places, they were articles and reviews that were going out and being printed in magazines. So.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that she did for me in '86. So here I'm on probation for my, at USC. And then in 1986, she wrote a review in Art in America on my show. Just thank you, Fran.
Before we open it out for audience questions, I'd love to take a moment to maybe hear from our curatorial team about what we're all about to see. I'm sure some of you all have maybe seen glimpses of the show, and most of us have not yet. It's opening tonight at 6. But I'm curious, it's, despite Fran's strong associations with abstraction, minimalism, clearly her eye was extremely wide, inclusive, and always curious, and that lends itself to maybe a lot of possibilities for a curatorial team organizing an exhibition. And I wonder if Scott and Sara-Jayne, you learned anything about Fran's eye as you considered the many possibilities the exhibition could take. Was there anything kind of you could tell from the body of work that you could consider associated with Fran about her own eye?
Scott, you haven't spoken. Go ahead.
I don't really have a clear answer for that, but one thing that really became very clear in looking at artists and reading her works and hearing from people that knew her very closely was the idea of really looking at art and thinking about how art functions, what it is. And that's one thing, so I don't know if I would say there's one particular kind of thread, just kind of like the idea like regionalism doesn't exactly make sense. It's more about people and place and engagement. And the idea of engagement with the ideas of art and artist's work was really so very strong. And all of our conversations were very much about thinking about artists who Fran was interested in, artists she worked with, people she wrote about, and really looking at a broad range of their works. You got a really strong sense that there was I don't know if the word commitment is the proper word, but commitment to engagement with art was really clear. And you don't always get that. And I think that's one thing, that's a big takeaway for me, is to really think about that. And I'll toss in one small thing that I've been thinking about myself. And our semester just began, and I have an assignment that begins where I make students write, and literally, because today you have to quantify everything, 20 sentences of description about a work of art before they talk about what anything means and if they like it or don't like it and what their first thoughts. I would literally count them as 20 sentences, like that clock on the wall, 20 sentences about that clock. And one of the things that I've been thinking about, what we were looking at was really, and our curatorial team was one of the most fulfilling experiences I've had in working with folks. It was really quite a joy working with people. Was how important it is to look and to stop and to think and to really engage. And that's kind of my big takeaway, more than wanting to say about conceptual art or abstract work or minimalist kinds of themes. It's really to engage, and that is an important reminder, takeaway, especially when things are so busy, is to have that experience. And I think as a curatorial team, we paused a lot because we were engaged about looking at the works.
I think you can tell that from the show.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
And I think for me, following on with that, it was like a reminder to keep looking, look more carefully, look again. And then as we were in this process, because we've been doing this for about 18 months, and we started with a huge list of artists and ideas that we were interested in, and so what you're going to see in the gallery is it's one iteration of the possibilities of what the show could be, and it's a group of curators and artists working together to kind of make that possibility. But this show could be 5 or 6 different ways. And I think for me, like Scott, it was the emphasis again to like slow down and look. But then I also found, like, after our meetings, I would go back and read something of Fran's. I would read that essay again, or I would read that review again of that artist. And then for me, it really became about her language and like just beautiful writing and very spare, and at times like reminding myself to like think carefully about those words. She was very particular about certain words that she was using as descriptions. And I think sometimes it's easy for us, and certainly for our students, to kind of forget that, because you've got to hammer out, you've got to write that paper that's due tomorrow, whatever, you just kind of throw everything into it. And so words became really important. And then as we've been doing the catalog, I think, and you should know that all the catalog entries on the artists have been written by former students of Fran. So in the way that she made exhibitions, where she made them with her students typically, and her students wrote the catalog entries and sort of really helped, in terms of maybe shaping some of the questions of the show, we've done the same thing. So we've kind of followed Fran's pedagogical model. And so reading her students and seeing tiny bits of Fran in there as they're writing about these artists, it's just really beautiful to see. But, in my own practice as a curator and writer, making me think again, like, ooh, needs to be way more rigorous, just to really think about that rigor. And I think that was kind of what's been left with me, the rigor of looking, thinking, and then certainly in terms of writing.
She spent a lot of time on her writing.
Yeah, the editing process.
About, like you said,
as we've been editing the catalog, and to also just mention the other part of the other people involved in the curatorial team. Hill Snyder, who's an artist in the show, he's sitting at the back. Wave to everybody else. And also Jennifer Hope Davey, who is an amazing contributor as part of this collaborative effort, and has really been so close to Fran and has worked really closely with her ephemera. So as part of the exhibition, you'll see some ephemera items. But working alongside her as we're editing the catalog, it's like, oh yeah, you were a student of Fran's. Like being reminded, again, just that process of really engaging with the works, then engaging with what's written about that work. It's been really hard. It's been a good workout, I think.
Yeah, I always, there's kind of a fierce dedication to thinking about art that's been kind of part of the curatorial process. And I think that is coming out of Fran's scholarship and engagement. And that's kind of the two words that I come away with from our conversations. And there's a real fierce dedication to working with things. And it's been just lovely as well.
Let's open it up to the audience. I imagine there might be some questions. There might also be comments. Would love to yield the floor to all of you if there's anyone who'd like to raise a question.
Can I say something?
Oh, sure, John.
So Edith and I were in the cafeteria at the Kimball today, and we were talking about what a loss it was for California when Fran left, and what a beautiful thing it was for Texas. So we were lamenting that because we really did feel a vacuum when she left. And but I caught myself walking around the museums here wondering which particular pieces she was attracted to and why. And it was interesting to kind of fall into looking at the art from Fran's point of view. And I think I learned something a long time ago about looking at art because I learned that from Fran. So I would just like to add that.
Great, thank you. Any questions, comments? Yeah, Eli.
I'm just curious to hear from some of y'all about how Fran impacted your perspective on painting specifically. Just their contributions on the depth of painting and sort of resurgence in the 80s and 90s. As a painter, was there this kind of like glimmer of hope that was Fran, writing about it, kind of trying to bring it back, or was it something, you're just always kind of chased inside of you, just open.
Well, I think she wound all art together, and that there was a quote that you gave earlier about the resurgence of painting, or painting shall always go on, or something like that. But I think she was just enthusiastic about any art that was being made, and insofar as painting went, it was interesting when Connie was talking about her sensitivity to the details in painting. And I remember the show, I think it's in the same gallery that we're going to go to tonight, that show that I was in here that she curated called Skin Freak. That was about an appreciation for the skin of, the skin of painting as a sort of coating of a particular sort. And so she was interested in that, but I think her Fran was, her foundation was in modernism, and really minimalism was her, her area of research. And I think that she carried that flag forward, through the postmodern period. As I was talking with a friend of mine, he said, she was a modernist that got hit by the postmodern asteroid, but went on anyway. And I think, but was always interested in all art, whether it was painting, sculpture, performance, video, on its own terms, has been talked about already. Yeah.
She taught me how to look at Paul McCarthy's work from a formal perspective. She really did. I have no idea.
Huge advocate for McCarthy in her classes, and like showing it to undergrads and like freaking them out.
Oh yeah, I think she used that as kind of a testing ground. But I think also to put up for what Erin said a little bit is that she never did. She always believed in painting as just as important as the newer forms that were coming about. And she would always kind of remind me that photography had not been taken seriously in academia until the 70s or something. But I think she didn't deal, in my memory anyway, she didn't really deal with the question of was painting dead, was it valid, etc. But she continued to believe in it equally with the other art forms because of her interest in that broader thing. And I would say material. What was the name of that show she did at your gallery about material?
Several.
The more recent one about material.
Material culture.
Material culture, right? Thank you. Yeah.
The discussion about Paul McCarthy, though, I think is really kind of telling for me, because you can come at Paul McCarthy from lots of directions, but actually coming at it by looking at it formally is kind of a different approach.
Yeah.
It's an important approach, and people forget that part of how we engage with art is to go through those exercises and that dedication. And so I think with how painting, how do you approach it at different time frames, we might put more emphasis on different ways of thinking, and then to remember that we can also need to engage in through different apparatuses and different methods and different moments and different language, I think is important. So your discussion about McCarthy makes sense to me quite a bit.
It was a revelation in a way.
Yeah.
So on a note, that artist, Paul McCarthy, went to USC, and they wanted to throw him out as well. It didn't go over too well there either, so just a little note in history here.
But that notion of material is all I wanted to say, is the materiality of painting, or the materiality of Judd's work as an example, the different materials that he used, or the materiality of light. In Glow included not only electric light or electronic means, but actual painting as well. Kind of understanding how all of those things can embody certain bigger, kind of ephemeral concepts, really.
I have to jump in and make a comment about Paul McCarthy.
I'm sorry I brought it up.
One of the great things that this panel has been, it's just brought up all kinds of memories. I've been jotting things down. But I was on a MA thesis committee here at TCU in the art department with Fran, with a student who was writing a thesis about Paul McCarthy. And given the work, we had fascinating conversations. But what I really remember is this issue of rigor. Fran and I spent probably a half an hour during one meeting talking about the number of ellipses you should have in a sentence that ends the quotation. And we were going back and forth, and this poor student was looking at me. What are you talking about? And Fran would go, well, Chicago Manual would go, yeah, section 1420. And it was the weirdest kind of thing, but it was, part of her rigor. But then she could turn around and have the students describe in great detail Paul McCarthy's work. So, thank you.
Yes, in the back.
Sorry, I arrived a little bit late, but I don't know if you had talked about the reason why the decision of the title. Do you really believe that? And if that was like what, in a way, Frances seed on all of you. And I didn't have the pleasure to meet her, but it sounds like she was a very transformative human being. So maybe she was all the time asking around, do you really believe that?
Yeah, she was.
She was. That's the reason why.
So I think in the very early curatorial conversations, it just was so obvious. Because everybody that we talked to about, should we do this show, should we not, what do you think, and everybody we spoke to had that story about if they'd been a student, they'd either been asked that question or they'd been in a seminar where somebody had been asked that question. And it just seemed also like, we were talking about it before, it seems like the moment to ask that question again. So it stuck from very early on, and a lot of people have responded to it with their own stories of what that meant to them and that question. And we've had some pins made, so you can pick up your pins and you can take that out into your communities and meet other artists and ask them those questions too. So we think it's a fundamental question, and we've thought about it a lot as we've been making the show.
I just want to add to that. There was another version of that phrase in the studio. It's like, you don't really believe it. This is a much lighter version of it, but it really challenged the students to say, she's like, I don't believe that bullshit. You don't really believe that, do you? And then making them kind of go through it. So.
I mean, she has that in her art history classes too. Like, she would call on me a lot in one of her classes. And one time she was like, Milliken, you don't really believe that, do you? And I looked at her and said, Dr. Colpitt, I don't know, I'm 19. And it just kind of set her back, and she just started laughing. I was like, I don't know if anyone had ever been like, no, I don't know, with her, but it was just such it has transformed the way I do my job and look at art. And so yeah, I mean, I was probably asked that question every lecture.
I think it was a way. It was her way of challenging you to sort of press your thinking and be sure about what you're thinking and rethink it if it needed to be. And I think if she was sitting right in one of these seats here, she would have said that several times already to us.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it was part of her rigor. I mean, of just I think she asked herself that all the time too.
Yeah.
She told me that she would say things in her classes, you guys probably can cite examples, but where she would say things she didn't believe, because she would really, instead of telling her students what she knew, she would use provocation as a way to get people thinking and talking.
Right.
And she would say things that were just Paul McCarthy, showing Paul McCarthy as an example, but she also she wasn't trying to provoke just to be provocative, but rather to ask everyone, including herself, to examine.
Yeah.
It's not just provoking, I think it's a welcoming question too.
Right. Yeah,
A lot of times
exactly.
people don't think they can answer and aren't asked to be part of something.
Right.
And so that kind of question, it's not just provoking intellectual, which I think it is, but it also is really welcoming. And you have a classroom of students and you ask them, have you ever seen a painting like this? And they'll look at you like, you have to ask them, what do you really believe? What are you looking at? And so I think it's really welcoming to the conversation.
Well, she
the generosity
kind of told me she was trying to be provocative.
Well, both.
But I think you're. But I want to say I think you're absolutely right.
But it's both. It's provoking to be part of something.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it was very again to go back to engagement.
Right.
And I can't speak to it as not having been a student, but I'll bet everybody who was totally agrees with that.
Terri?
I think that what that was her showing that she had I mean, she wasn't doing it to show she was invested in you, but that was a show of her investment in you. To be willing to say, you don't really believe that, do you? That was like an enormous show of care. You know? So it's both, you're right.
Questions? Any other questions? Well, maybe we leave it at that. Of course, I'm not going to speak for the galleries, but I assume everyone is more than welcome to head over to Fuaka. And the opening will begin at 6 p.m. Is that right?
In about 20 minutes.
And I'd love to ask everyone to join me in a big round of applause. Thank you. Have a good night.